Vanderjam.
Coffee and a vape, and it's time to roll tape. Good morning. It's the Vanderjam. As always, it's me, Mayor Howard Vander, and as always, you can find me living over on Twitter at Vander_I am. Coming to you with a brand new episode of, I think, season 5. It's Vanderjam Gaiden, a parallel story set within the greater Vanderverse, which you can also follow by heading to linktree.com/HowardVander, I think, or send me money on Ko-fi.com/MayorVander. I can use it. Tune in to last episode and hear all about how so many people would rather eat coins than donate them to the city coffer, as it were. I'm much less of a coffer as I quit smoking. I got a cool new vape. It's a Caliburn. It has refillable pods. Right now, I am partaking in a pleasant tobacco custard vape. It is a nicotine salt. There's no draw control, it is draw activated. The more I talk about my vaporizer, the more I realize I shouldn't have left it in the other room. I'm sorry, I was thinking about my vape again. One sec. Ah, I can podcast again. Thanks to the good people at Caliburn. Yeah, also I'm glad I'm sitting down at the desk. I've been doing okay despite going through a time of separation. That's a long story. Maybe I'll break kayfabe on that at some point, but probably not right now. Just know that there's a legitimate need for you to stop eating coins. There's always a legitimate need for you to stop. I am not going to do another episode where that's the anchor through line bit. I can assure you that much. No, I've been doing okay. Processing, keeping busy, painting. I am painting my apartment and undertaking various undertakings, endeavors, how-tos, make work projects, as it were. The negative consequences, I actually love my living space once again. And now I'm kind of going through like a pandemic echo. I believe the Japanese call it hikikomori. I don't ever want to leave my house. And I just want to sit here and sort of return to that time where I had things worked out, or at least I had convinced myself, and I was sitting underneath a bunk bed, speaking alone into my laptop, and that did unlock a lot of wonderful doors, don't get me wrong. I love being the mayor. I need to stop being resentful towards it. All to say is, today was a day that the anxiety got to me a bit. And then I noticed I had some unsightly ingrown hairs on my face, and one of my worst compulsions when I'm stressed is going at it hardcore with tweezers. You do a lot of harm to yourself to create a measure of relief, much like a breakup in and of itself. Speaking of breakups, there's a major thing in the news, a interregional civil war, as it were. Um, I think a lot of people probably, if this is your first geopolitical event, if you're under the age of, say, 25, maybe don't weigh in. Like, you're needed in terms of showing up at protests and rallies and retweeting stuff. You are a positive number in that regard. Not everybody needs to hear your take about how I guess more than anything, I'm realizing is there's this tendency people have where it's not enough that you can't just be right or you can't exceed to the fact that you've changed your mind or thought about things in nuance. You just have to be correct, and any time that it seemed like you were wrong, it was people misunderstanding you or misunderstanding why you were ultimately correct. Um, I think there's something analogous in the way that it's not enough for people like Castro or Mao or communist authoritarian leaders. It's not enough to be like, well, they did a lot of very positive things, and a lot of their civilizations, their populace really enjoyed them. But I think it crosses a certain line when you're earnestly going, look, in 1994, Cuba had an election and Castro won by 100%. The people adored him. It's like, you have to remember these people fought revolutions. They overthrew governments. And that doesn't mean that they're monsters who don't respect civil order. It's that you have to be willing to go to certain lengths if you want to change the world, and not every system that the world operates or has operating within it functions the same way that a voting democracy does. I mean, look at our country in the past 20 years. You could argue much longer than that, but for our lifetimes, think about what electoralism has achieved for anyone, regardless of political affiliation. You know, I don't think it's an accident that voting rights or voting turnout tends to be low, very low, given the size of the nation and everything. But there's also the trickle down effect where, eventually you're going to have an election with like 50% turnout and one candidate wins by like 3%. And they're like, see, a stunning majority of Americans have given us a mandate to pursue injecting deadly poison into our food and water supply. It says, why did we vote for these guys again? They said they would lower taxes. You know, the hand thing, that's the taxes. I try not to be a show where it's just a white man giving his deep personal thoughts and reflecting on how everybody just needs to consider what he says more thoughtfully to achieve a unified utopia of an unseen future. Alliteration has its limits, as does your mayor. Thankfully, I hit my limit much, much later, thanks to this glorious Caliburn A. Is it an AZ3 vaporizer? This is thrilling radio. So I've gotten into jazz lately. Um, that's been interesting. I think there was a time where I tried to get into jazz and it was very much approaching it because that was the hip thing to do. It's like other hipsters drink PBR. Um, these days I don't drink at all. Marking 9 years today actually since I last had a drink. That night it was whiskey and a six pack of cheap beer. It was absolutely dreadful, but it was also 6%. So at that time, I was following the alcoholic economics of, hey, you get fucked up for less money. Um, I think, as I've said before, I don't really remember the feeling of being drunk. I do remember the feeling of being hungover, and that kind of keeps me on the straight and narrow. I think I have more time to also reflect on who I am when I drink, and that makes it easier to keep the wolf behind the door. Every now and then I have a dream where I end up drinking. It's always whiskey, and it's always kind of by accident, and then somebody I know sees me, and we're both immediately let down. Sort of like that scene in Touch of Evil, where Wells, he's the crooked cop, and he sits down like two-thirds of the way through the movie after saying he doesn't touch a drop of liquor, and the guy pours him a cocktail after, I think somebody gets murdered or something. But he sits down, the guy pours him a glass, and he downs it. And then they talk a little while longer, and he offers him a drink, and he says, no, I don't touch the stuff. Then he looks down, and then he takes the second one. I used to feel bummed out because I learned Orson Welles, I believe, was 23 or 24 when he made Citizen Kane, which is astounding. It's like finding out that Nas was like, I think, 19 or 20 when he wrote and recorded most of Illmatic. And I used to often look at my life in terms of, okay, well, I'm 24 years old and I haven't done anything on par with Citizen Kane, so I guess my life is a failure. Impersonator! Imposter syndrome. Impersonator syndrome is also like changeling syndrome, where you genuinely believe that a loved one or friend has been replaced by an identical double who is still not them. It's there's a bunch of weird delusions where it's like that seems so hyper specific that it sounds made up, but if it's like classified as a recurrent delusion, like the Fragoli delusion, stuff like that, it is interesting that it's reported often enough, and it's not the kind of thing where I think it gets chatted about in sewing circles. Like how everybody had that cousin who did shrooms and kidnapped a garden gnome they found, and it turned out to be a kid with Down syndrome or something. I heard about 5 or 6 different people tell me that story and get like mortally offended when I'm like, does everybody have the same cousin? It's funny that this cousin also can be found on message boards everywhere, you know. But who was phone? There's a lot of things about the internet that will only make sense to you in a very narrow section of people like you. But there's also that tendency in web culture to assume everybody knows everything. And I'll freely admit, I'm 37 years old. I don't understand what most acronyms mean. I don't know what most of your memes mean. I don't know what Glizzy is. I don't know what Rizzed Up is. I barely even know who Gronk is. Okay, Lizzo, yeah, she was getting fame, and now she ain't. And like that's about my borderline understanding of most current events as it pertains to pop culture. I have been going to the movies more often, taking friends and family. It has been good to go out. So I guess I'm not really a hikikomori. That going back about 10 minutes. That is a social concept more unique to Japan. My understanding is there are societal conventions, certain kind of networked business culture that facilitate it, but it's an extreme form of social withdrawal. Anybody in the house seen Serial Experiments Lain? That's kind of what it's like, only you don't develop powers, or not so much develop powers as much as have a growing awareness that you are a being that is somehow beyond physical reality, despite not fully realizing that from the outset. I think what's interesting about a show like Lain is that to this day, there are still many arguments and many different approaches as to what the show is really about in both a thematic sense and a plot sense. It's famously abstract. It's not the kind of thing that I think you can put on for popcorn with the boys. We're going to watch Attack on Titan, then we're going to watch some Naruto, and then we're going to watch Lain. It's like, by that point, everybody's like, man, do I even really exist? All I want to do is be an otaku. Eat my tacos. Yeah, it's a tortilla with seaweed in it. Whoa, you should send that into Shonen Jump. Yeah, I'm so cool because I'm able to dunk on these people using their language because I used to be slash still am one. Um, that's the beautiful thing about anime. The same thing about professional wrestling, because there are people that try to do that detached, superior hipster correctness, and I don't because I am one. Uh, but you have to take a step back and be like, okay, but you're being like the most learned, um, opinioned commentator on professional wrestling, which, when we take that global step back, is people pretending to fight in accordance with a scripted finish. The same way that being really snobby about anime is like, look, man, there are these cartoons, you see, but they're not. It's like what graphic novels are to comics. Now imagine that as national form. It's like, okay, but that's some anime. The majority of it, it's like Francois Truffaut described cinema as unique in that it's an industrial art, because it's both a medium and a product. it is mass produced, and for all the art cinema, the verite, the documentary, the stuff that doesn't play in major commercial circuits, the majority of films that are produced are either not for profit entirely, like short documentaries for like corporate training or whatever, or they are mass consumer entertainment, and that is absolutely fine. The only error you really make is when you are trying to evaluate all content by the litmus of were the creators intending to make great art? Because if they failed at that, then this movie or this show is atrocious. It's like no, it's like Garfield. Jim Davis doesn't care if people respect the writing. He just knows that if it stays in print, then he can go on to 3 more vacations that year. You are never going to see a Garfield that addresses the issues. It's not like they. I'm trying to even think about what Garfield doing like a topical storyline would be, where it's like John discovers he has prostate cancer because he was too neurotic to let a doctor check him. Um, Garfield recognizes he's the last of his species due to global warming. Oh, got it. Instead, when Roe v. Wade got overturned, they could do something like Roe v. OD, like Odie, Wade, Odie, like is wordlessly litigating his right to an abortion. Um, stuff like that. Archie found a way to do it. And in some respects, Archie is the most sort of Baudrillardian, imaginary past, a sort of a constructed history of an America that never was, where everybody wore vests everywhere, and it was normal to wear a bow tie to class. And everybody hung out at the malt shop, and even when you didn't get along, nobody punched each other out or drew knives or anything. It would just be like Reggie saying something cutting, and then, 5 pages later, a bunch of stuff would get dumped on him. Also, as a kid, around the same time noticing that Garfield doesn't have word bubbles, he has thought bubbles, noticing around then that in Archie Comics, everyone in Riverdale is constantly yelling. I remember, like, you sometimes will see an Archie word panel that has a period at the end of a sentence, and you're like, whoa, this is incredible. Because every other time, it's an exclamation mark. It's crazy. I text the same way, but to an outside observer, it sounds like everyone is yelling all the time. And it's like, was that what 50s America was like? Was it normal to hang out with your principal on the weekend? I don't know. At the same time, there are so many Archie that I remember incredibly well. They had, I think it was a 3-parter with the substitute teacher, Malcolm Meeks, who everybody hated. He was this real loser. And like day one, he ends up rear-ending Mr. Weatherby's car. It's a Yakisaki pigeon. And I remember because he says, my Yakisaki pigeon, you bumped into it. He says, well, it only looks like a dent. It won't have to be pigeon-toed. Everyone hates Mr. Meeks, and like they throw paper balls at him, and he just turns around like, well, he lives up to his name. They didn't call him Malcolm Confrontational. We're not exactly getting like Mark Danilewski type writing here. But yeah, then there's a football game that Riverdale has, and it turns into sports drama for a bit, and then a helicopter that's filming the game or overhead sputters out, and it crashes in the field, and then Malcolm X like covers himself in Gatorade, dives into the flaming helicopter and saves a bunch of people, and then he's in the hospital, and he tells them, oh man, I've been messed up ever since I was in Vietnam. We got out of a helicopter, and then I was trying to rescue my friends, and then a VC sniper shattered my hip bone. It's insane to think that, like, even then, that was an Archie thing. Being a kid, and this is your... I don't know what that was. Imagine that being your exposure to Vietnam. Imagine that being all your historical knowledge of Vietnam. The Archie 3-parter with Malcolm Meeks. Every now and then there would also be ones where like the Riverdale gang would run afoul of a criminal plot. Those would run like 4 or 5, even 6 parts. It's crazy. It made full use of the double digest format. I still have a couple sitting around the house, and they are still fun to read. And how can you go wrong? Like, what are some other great Archie memories? Veronica's having a pool party and yells the organic line of, "Hey gang, Smithers is pouring root beer. We have small size mugs," and then pans over to bigger ones and large size mugs, and then Jughead's behind with a pail, and he's just filling that up with root beer. Goes, "A Jughead size mug." So it's like, wow, gonna sit poolside and drink this pail of root beer. Well, you wear the crown for a reason, King. Hats off to you, Forsyth. There's another one where Moose is at like one of Ronnie's shindigs, her socials. Black tie affair, and he's loudly devouring hors d'oeuvres, and Veronica's like, "Moose, those are awful manners. Don't you realize that's terribly uncouth?" And he passes the empty plate over and goes, "Duh, can I have some more uncouth?" I remember the classic clapback against liberal feminism where Archie is saying, "Our new mailman is a woman named Gladys," to which Veronica says, "Archie, that's very chauvinistic. You should say male person." And then the very organic phrase, "By the way, where is your new male person?" And then he points to a sewer and says, "Over there, by the person hole." It's like, ha ha ha! You can take that back to Seneca Falls, lady. Look, you got the right to vote, but I think right now you got the right to remain silent. Carrot Top, you've outdone yourself. This is, don't worry, it's decaf, because it's 8:46 p.m. I know I said good morning, but I was also lying to you. It's real theater of the mind. For you see, when I sit down at this computer, doesn't matter what time of day it is, doesn't matter what's happening in my life, it really doesn't matter what's happening in the world, because all you have to do is press a button and talk. Or you press another couple of buttons and listen. And I guess I realized that after taking a year away from doing it and a whole lot of other bullshit going down and life changing and things never being able to go back to the way that it was, I realized it's fun to do the jam. It is nice to be able to weave something linear or something logical about disparate and messy reality. It's not just escapism, I don't think. Escapism to me is the idea of I don't want to deal with that, versus a more purposeful and constructive sense of almost community improv. I know that Twitter Town in the real early days was very much an effort towards that. Shout out to friend of the show Brandy for making a Vander Town library newsletter. It was very sweet. Um, it takes work, it takes effort, but I'm not the only one who puts in that effort. And cultivating that space of positivity, much like friend of the show, Edward Odell, has with the Nice Pilled podcast, Discord server, and brand. Go check that out. We live in a time where it's so easy to get caught up in bullshit and culture wars and flame wars, troll wars, land wars, civil wars. The Cola Wars, everything is a war. I think George Carlin did this bit, so I'm not going to. But it doesn't always have to be. And yeah, that's naive as hell, but there's a lot of a book like Slaughterhouse-Five, which remains relevant year after year. There's a lot about that book that strikes people as naive. And I don't think it's owing to a simplicity of ideas as much as a straightforwardness of expression. Sometimes things are that simple, and while I'm not going to pretend that I have the same philosophical insight as Kurt Vonnegut does in that book, though I did start smoking Pall Mall cigarettes specifically as a brand because of Kurt Vonnegut, so he's got that one on me. But I'm also alive and he's not, so jury's still out. I know that he didn't write and release Illmatic in his early 20s. So take that, Father Kurt. The point is that Vonnegut understood what he was trying to say. I don't, but I understand that the process of doing so is as simple as going ahead and doing it. And yeah, that says, well, Mayor, you have free time and I don't. I don't really have a lot of free time, but I can free up half an hour and put in the work. It's even easier when you don't take notes or really do extensive editing. But you're also taking the time to sit down and read this. And from the very beginning, I have always maintained I found a way to do this, and that means literally everybody can too. I may talk a lot, but I'm also dumb as a bag of wet sand, and that's okay. I'm learning to live with who I am, and I know that you can learn to live with yourself because I want to live with you. And how can my heart ever be wrong? Said the guy who's currently going through a separation. That's not the point. Other people, but my heart, this heart's on fire. Don't tell me that this heart's a liar. Your sight, the sight of you, I am inspired. Please don't touch me. I'm a real life wire. That's coming off of my forthcoming rap disc. It's called Illmatic. It's looking to drop shortly after my 20th birthday, which is coming up next week. I think I just found a bug, which sucks. I have this place sprayed, but it's worth it, baby. It's well worth it. I don't know. At least I don't feel as embarrassed about where I'm living. I guess I'm not a hikikomori after all. And I guess I'm not struggling as badly as I thought I was after all. I guess sometimes you just need space to spin out your wheels. And maybe you don't have a junky old laptop that keeps restarting on you and has a laptop built or a microphone built into the keyboard, so you can't touch anything while you're recording, and the audio quality sounds like shit, and you may not know what you're doing, and you may be named Howard and have too much free time. The point is, those who can do. Those who can't can freely download and support the show. Stop eating money. Give it to your mayor. Point is, we're all in this together, and you're more creative than you think. I've said so from the beginning. And remember, I cannot be you, but you can be the mayor. Because the Vanderjam, more than a show, more than a brand, more than anything, it's a state of mind, a state of being, a state of doing. Baby. Is all this philosophical talk turning you on? Please come back to me. Just kidding. I'm learning to actually be pretty fine being on my own, because I'm never truly alone. I have each and every one of you. More importantly, you have me, Bites Finger. I'll be whatever mayor you want to be. Who even wrote this? Okay, this is why I don't take notes. I've been talking long enough, and I'm probably going to connect with superstar producer and best friend, Medium Hollow, so we can finally finish our Prestige miniseries, Don't Take It Personally. So look for that coming up. Also look for more Vanderjam episodes, and if you want to get interviewed, get in touch. As always, I can be found via email at iamhowardvander@gmail.com, on Twitter at Vander_I am. I've got 3 different SoundClouds. I'm probably going to start doing OnlyFans or something erotic again. You can find my Ko-fi and stuff. Check it out if you want to do something. I'm always happy to feature other people, whether it's a conversation, a song, even a question to write in with and answer on air, live to record. Yeah, this is as much for you guys as it is for me. So let's do something with it. Why don't we? I know what I'm going to do for now, though. I'm going to vape a bit more, thanks to the good people at Caliburn, and I am going to have another sip of delicious coffee. And we are all going to take a knee and bring it on in, because it's time for our closing prayer. Baudrillard, Riverdale, government so large it cannot fail. Authoritarian, Castro's rule. Marxist governance, is pretty cool. Separation, live alone. Moss grows fat on rolling stones. And if you wonder where I am, the mayor's at home on the Vanderjam. See you next time. They say that the world will end in fire, but that is impractical, and they say George Washington never lied, but that is impossible, and it's hard to tell if you truly are the prophet of your age, or if what you need is a stiff drink in the hospital. But I can only speak my mind, and I hope to find the place where I want to be, up there on the clouds, where we laugh aloud as they try stopping me. And I don't know about you, but I've seen the truth and know what I believe, and you'll see it too on the day that you see life through eyes of green. They say that history is a veil, letting calloused men disguise. They say the paper tells the tale, we act out with our lives. And they say that